Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Needs Some Introduction. In today's episode, Sona and I will be breaking down the third episode of this seemingly very popular show, Your Friends and Neighbors, on Apple TV Plus, the new John Hamm series, which is currently in production on season two, Sona. Currently produced, they're currently
Wow.
shooting season two. And James Marsden, who we just saw in Paradise, and so great in that show, honestly. But without spoiling too much, if you've seen the pilot episode of that show, you're like, how's he going to come back for season two? Although they did bring it back for season one. So that's just a tease for you. If you've only seen episode one of Paradise and you're wondering, he is indeed in all of season one, but you do wonder, can they drag this on for another season? Apparently not, because Paradise season two is currently being shot. And also, Your Friends and Neighbors is being shot. And James Marsden is now a regular cast member on season two of Your Friends and Neighbors. And I assume there's going to be lots of scenes where John Hamm and James Marsden get in each other's faces going like, I'm more handsome. And they're like, no, I'm more handsome. But anyway, it was pretty funny. If anyone heard the conversation earlier this week, Darren mentioned that he watched Your Friends and Neighbors with his wife, and he said, I had no idea she was so into John Hamm. It's like I think everybody's into John Hamm in this particular show. He's his most John Hammy in this particular show. He's more Don Draper than even Don Draper.
Seriously.
And a little bit of news. Just a follow up on previous conversations. Would we have the biggest week for downloads on the finale of The White Lotus? It was a little challenge to the audience. We did. We made it, everybody. Thank you for getting us over the hurdle.
Yay.
I'm not sure if it will be long term our most popular episode, but hey, let's see. It's still getting plays every day, so it's possible.
Love that.
Also very popular, this particular show, Your Friends and Neighbors, for our podcast as well. So hopefully we've transitioned. That audience has come with us, and I think it's a good fit. So far, I'm very much enjoying this show.
Totally agree.
Oh, and a little more news, of course. No, I will not be around next week, Sona. And I was going to actually record just a recommendation episode for things you might want to watch, given what we'll be covering on the podcast in the future. Anyway, best laid plans, everybody. This week has been quite a week, and I have recorded no additional content. So there will be no content next week. I might republish an old episode. I'll look through the archive, and maybe I'll republish the Ripley episode, by the way, because everybody seemed to love that one.
Oh,
So if anyone out there has looking for something else to watch in this jam-packed month of stuff, check out Ripley. Maybe I'll just put the episode out there in case you haven't tracked it down yet. But the following week, Sona and I will be coming back, probably recording next weekend. So expect it on Monday morning or Monday afternoon. We will indeed be covering Your Friends and Neighbors episode 4. And then, of course, at the end of that week, episode 5 as well. And then in between, we'll be catching up on Andor. There's going to be so many episodes of Andor. 6 episodes, I think, at that point of Andor, because they're dropping 3 per week. So maybe I'll just talk about the first couple episodes. And of course, we're talking about Mobland here in the podcast also. So we'll touch base on Mobland. All that is to say, nothing next week, but plenty of content, maybe a lot more content the following week. All right. So any plans for you? No travel plans, I assume.
well, actually, my son's spring break was this prior week.
Oh, that's right.
So we did not go away. Instead, we white knuckled it through every single day, taking it as it came. While a bathroom renovation was going on in my house,
Oof,
I worked from home and my kid was around, and somehow we have survived
survived. That's all you
this.
can hope for at that point,
Yes, with very little damage. But
except for the bathroom.
the bathroom, I think, is actually done, which is amazing. Not without some drama. And, just generally, you and I talked before we started recording this whole week.
Oof.
As much as I was joking in connection with White Lotus about people that complain about Mercury being in retrograde, I think Mercury was in retrograde because everything that could happen this week happened this week. And the train was off the rails. It was a runaway train. I was just trying to hang on to it. I don't know. I'm mixing my metaphors, but I am just trying to make it to the end of today and hope for a reset this weekend.
Exactly. I'm paraphrasing, but today was one of the longest weeks of my life.
Exactly.
All right. On a more pleasant note, one thing I did get to do last night, despite the fact that all of this chaos that I had occurred last night, because I'm work-wise, that is, I did have time in my downtime to actually watch this episode. Watched it with my wife, no less, and she very much enjoyed it still. This episode, Sona, called Theoretical Herpes.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that there is anything, maybe I'm overanalyzing this title, but do you think there's anything about this, a contagious venereal disease amongst this population that's very incestuous in maybe knowing a little bit too much about each other, and how if one of these people gets herpes, maybe they all get herpes? Theoretically, they all have herpes.
What an interesting question. It does seem like there is a common feeling of discontent or disaffection among this group of people. I hadn't considered that maybe that's a different level for the title, just because it seems like they're just trying to have kind of a little zinger with that title. but there might be more to it.
I actually agree that it was actually a very funny moment, and maybe the highlight of the episode. That whole entire conversation is maybe the highlight of this whole entire episode. But
It
I
was
think
a
that's,
great conversation.
and I think it's just directly referencing that. But I did want to maybe overanalyze it a little bit. He does talk about in his narration this episode how there are some obvious metaphors, and of course, the most obvious metaphor of all is the moth metaphor here in this episode. But maybe herpes is a metaphor as well. By the way, they missed an opportunity to put the sweater song in here by Weezer.
Ha, ha.
As the episode kicked off, I did think it was interesting to see how Tori reacts to Nick. And I don't even know why I had this opinion, but I had like a feeling that they were relatively cool with the whole Nick situation because they seemed kind of alienated from the dad. But I did feel this animosity towards Nick here, especially from her. Maybe that shows that she is unhappy with what her mom's done and having Nick here in the family. Now, she may or may not blame Nick for that. And also, even just the idea that her dating this older guy might be a way of, as a rebellion or maybe bringing the dad closer again. What did you think about this opening sequence?
It kind of made sense to me in that it's only been a couple of years. I think teenagers are difficult in the most healthy marriages. Teenagers are difficult. This to me is like a very fragile time to be splitting up a marriage and introducing a new partner. And as someone who kind of was in a similar situation during that age, it was a rough go. So I think it adds up as to a very natural reaction from her.
Almost as if we've only seen her have this kind of attitude towards the dad. And then you see how she, in last week's episode, she didn't take the mom's muffin or whatever. But that seems like
Right.
maybe she's just
I
like,
thought that was an anti-carb thing, maybe. But
exactly. She's like, I don't eat carbs, mom. What are you talking about?
yeah, I'm paleo.
To that point, you have Nick making like, you need more protein in your diet. And she's just like, I'm not having this. But that makes me feel like it's a lot more to do with the circumstance itself and how this is all one happy family. And she's like, really? Come on. Which maybe is what is happening amongst every one of these family members, actually,
Right.
or these couples in
Right.
all these houses. Speaking to that point of everybody's house falling apart, we see that Barney's house is currently under renovation. Speaking of your renovation, this is a little more expansive. And
Yeah.
they're putting a lot of trees up. They need shade for some reason. All of this, I thought the Barney's family dynamic was really entertaining. And how the fact that the wife has bought him, was it a Rolls or was it a Bentley?
Oh, I don't remember because that wasn't the point for me.
Yes.
I don't know anything about cars. So I just know it was a very expensive car.
Yeah, I'm not really a car guy either, but it is a beautiful car. But it did make me think about two things there. One is it's very funny that the wife has bought the car as a way to get whatever she wants as far as the home improvements go. The second thing I found interesting here is this discovery that Barney is desperately trying to get. This is the onion being peeled here of these different characters in their lives. He needs Coop to start working again because Coop apparently was his biggest customer. Mm-hmm. So now, of course, this is putting a crimp in his lifestyle. And of course, his bills are climbing just as everyone else's here on the show are.
Well, it's a 7-figure renovation, we find out later. So
yes, it's probably a 7-figure home. They're making a 7-figure renovation to it. On top of that, using his equity to refinance the house. So those payments are just doubling. literally.
I
The
like how
mortgage
you're
pays.
getting into the logistics of it. Probably took a home equity loan. I wonder what percentage rate he got.
Well, that's what everybody does, right? Around here, everybody flips their homes and they're taking equity out of the house to, basically put it right back into the house again. And now they have to a second mortgage to pay. It's the way we live.
Yep.
What do you think? Is the show able to pull off this critique? And I say this as someone who really enjoys the show so far, but I'm curious to see what it's trying to do here, this balancing act, and if it's fully successful in being able to critique the shallowness of this and then like seeing this advertisement level pornographic photography of the car, of the wine, of all these amenities that everybody loves. What do you think the show is trying to say in having him talk about how midlife crises of these rich men have spawned multiple whole economies? And then
I
whenever
love
one of
it.
these objects are in our purview, it's like beautiful ogling of the lifestyle itself. And do you think it's pulling it off?
What occurred to me while I was watching this is I was wondering how this show would play outside of major metropolitan areas.
Yes.
Because to me, this was such a precise skewering of, to my knowledge, a kind of suburban New York, and
Yes.
particularly, I thought, Westchester, Connecticut culture that was spot on as to how these people live and their sudden interest in smoked meats, you know,
Right.
or whatever, the scotch and all of that, the reverence for those things because you just don't know where else to put your mental energy. I thought it was all spot on and it worked for me, but I don't know if it would work for everybody depending on their frame of reference.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually was looking at some of the reviews on some of these message boards where they aggregate reviews for the show, for all these shows. The audience reaction is very positive for the show in general, but I always curious to see what the negative reviews are. You are exactly spot on. The negative comments are saying this is a show made for New Yorkers. Other
Yeah,
people are saying
I
this
get that.
is rich people problems, right? And these people are
I
all
get that.
terrible, or these people are all boring, and I can completely understand that. But I think, of course, we live in this area, so we definitely know people at some level that are all on this treadmill trying to keep up with the Joneses. It's right in that terrible theme song of this show. But more interestingly, I think if there's some commentary in this show, it's the fact that I think collectively we do this, right? We watch these reality shows with these rich people and we follow these celebrities, and of course we build them up and then we tear them down. I think the show is reflecting what is in the culture, where we can't wait for these people to fall, but we do really bask in like, man, I wish I had a private jet, and then at the same time we trash them for having a private jet. It works for me because the show is having it both ways, but I think we all want it both ways.
Yeah, sure. Fair point. I mean, I think we feel like, yes, I would love to have those nice things, but I would not be insufferable to be around if I were like that.
Exactly. I wouldn't be like that. I wouldn't be so shallow about
Yes,
it.
I would
I
be so down to earth and relatable.
Yeah.
And
If I
that
if
might
I
have been
hated
everyone's intentions, but it gets away from you.
exactly. If I hated to go to the club, I'm not going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to hang out in the club I can't stand. It's like, oh,
Right.
yes, you would. Because
I don't
everybody
even
else
like
did it.
scotch.
Right, right. I wouldn't spend $30,000 on a toilet. Oh, yes, you would. If it massaged your butt while you're using it. To that point that Barney needs this to go smoothly, he introduces him to Rick Masiello. This is a lawyer who is going to negotiate this contract. Maybe you have a little insight into what they're describing here. He's saying you're going to lose this case, but if you wait it out, there'll be a settlement. I was a little unclear on this. Did you understand any of this?
I also found it a bit hard to follow, and they threw in a technical term of summary judgment there, which was
Right.
bizarre to me for a show that is not designed for lawyers. But the gist of it seems to be that the case is probably ultimately a loser, but there are several points in litigation where settlements are likely to happen. And one is when you get past a motion to dismiss the complaint, which means that you have properly alleged your claims and they're sound as a matter of legal interpretation. And another is the motion for summary judgment, which there's no easy way to describe this, but there are facts in dispute such that the case has to continue on in order to resolve those disputed facts. I have evidence a sweater was red. You have evidence a sweater was blue. Our evidence is both valid and conflicting. So a jury needs to decide whether it was red or it was blue. And the lawyer is saying if you can get past that summary judgment stage, that is a likely settlement point. So it's not that you have to win the whole case, it's that you have to survive summary judgment. And after that, they will come with a settlement offer because it won't make financial sense to keep litigating.
There also seemed to be something about the fact that it's their own reputation, right? Like suing somebody, and if the details of this, when it drags out, I assume would be bad for trying to attract talent if this is going to happen when they're trying to exit with what they thought was part of their contract, right? So I assume that's part of what they want this to go away. Of course, granted, what you said, like you're saying, that they need to get past that initial hurdle, and that would be expensive, and he can't necessarily pay that, but they can. So that, of course, is always going to be put them in at an advantage. What did you think about the fact that he reaches out to Olivia, right? Her name. She still ties into this. I still think she's going to be a bigger part of how this goes eventually. And it's interesting that he expects her, or hopes that she will take his side and, not necessarily, state the truth when they come to litigate, because I'm not sure he's the type of guy who would be a stand-up guy for somebody else, but he is kind of expecting her to help him out here.
It's true. I actually saw this more as a plot device than anything else.
Yeah,
She
true.
say, remember this girl, she's going to be important later.
Yes.
Right? I don't think it was so much about the substance of the conversation. I know she was alarmed that her name was going to be involved in these
Right.
filings. I felt like she actually maybe overinflated the importance by like, my name will be in the papers or whatever it is she said.
Right.
But maybe it would be. So yeah, to me, this was not really so much about the substance as it is kind of keeping that plot going.
Yeah, I agree that from a plot standpoint, she's going to whatever help him get in some information out of the computer in the future. That, and definitely they're keeping her as the inside person, reminding us that she's still there. But I did just find it interesting, given their conversation, that she is expected to be stand up for him. Where, once again, I think if the shoe was on the other foot, is he really going to do this for somebody else? I don't think so. It
Good
just
question.
kind of speaks to the fact, I think, repeatedly in this character, and maybe to some of that criticism. Oftentimes there's this expectation that because someone's the protagonist, we're supposed to think they're a good person, or we're supposed to empathize with them. I don't think he's proving himself to be a very good person or very empathetic. But
I agree with you, and maybe it's just the John Hamm likability. I
of
feel
course.
like
Oh, of
I give
course.
him a wider berth than
Yes.
you are, but it's probably not justified, but just my own bias.
Oh no, I think there's the whole John Hamm of it. I think there's
Yes.
the fantasy elements of it that we would love to be stealing from these cluelessly rich people. A fun aspect to it.
Well, and they've made him such a self-aware character
Yes.
with his
Mhm.
internal monologue narrating how stupid all of it is, you know?
Yes, that was the last thing I was going to say. And I definitely, if we didn't have that interior narrative where he's aware of the screw ups he's doing, maybe not as aware as he should be, but also very aware of the emptiness of all of this. So,
Right.
Yeah, that saves him a lot, obviously. I think without the narration, we would be asking a lot of questions like, why is he
I
doing what
agree.
he's doing?
Yeah, I agree.
It relies a lot on narration, and it uses it in a good way. Still, I think they over rely on it, but maybe necessary in this particular case.
Yeah, I wonder what's coming to mind right now. Not that this is a similar show whatsoever, but a show that relied a lot on internal monologue, Dexter,
Right.
which also has a character that you might struggle to like, given that he's a serial killer, if not for the internal monologue, at least in part, adding a lot of depth to what's going on.
I hadn't made that connection, but that is actually probably somewhat of a template for this show, in seeing someone do bad things and then hearing their rationale for it. And that is how you build your empathy for the person.
Yeah, you kind of take their side, even though you know objectively you shouldn't.
Right. Yeah. Very much an anti-hero. So, and now we get to talk to Mel and her closet. And how did she not notice these moths were in her house?
Well, they're behind the walls, I
Yes.
think,
I guess
so maybe they're just starting to come out.
right. But there's a lot of them. It seems like there's quite an infestation going on.
Yeah, my hair
Maybe
is
they have so
standing on
many
end
closets.
just talking about it. Yeah.
Maybe they have so many closets in this house
So
that they.
many closets. What a great problem to have.
I was talking to my wife about this. I'm like, what happened to moths? Maybe it's just because we have so many synthetic fibers now that we in our clothing.
So many.
But I remember when we were kids that like if you didn't put mothballs in the closet, when you pulled out like a jacket at the end of the season, like the next year, there'd be a moth would fall out of there and it'd have little holes chewed into it. So now it seems like we don't get those kind of moth problems. So maybe once again, it's just all this synthetic fiber.
They always went for my cashmere sweaters. It was like they knew the good stuff.
And I think this maybe was maybe cashmere. I don't know what her sweater was that she
I would expect it was, yeah.
what do you think about her picking the sweater apart here? Is like is that beyond repair? Maybe it was beyond repair, but it seemed like
No,
she
you
made
know
it much
what?
worse.
Actually, when they showed the original hole, I had this thought, really random. There's this idea of quiet luxury or quiet wealth. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be getting the phrase wrong. But there's this idea that very old money, wealthy people don't just buy new clothes all the time. They buy an incredible quality piece of clothing and then repair it when necessary.
Right.
And so when I saw that hole, I had that thought of like, oh, this is probably a very expensive sweater. And if you're old money, you would go to a reweaver and have it repaired. And instead, she just clawed that hole open until the sweater was not there anymore, essentially.
At first, I didn't even think it was going to be related to moths at all. I thought it was going to be once again a metaphor for her picking and
I
picking
thought
at
so too.
something until she
Yeah.
unravels the whole entire thing. There's many metaphors going on here. Not only her
Yeah.
unraveling her life and her sweater simultaneously, but the whole idea that there is behind all this luxury, there is the moths are in the wall and they're eating through the carpets and they're infesting the house and they're going to eat all her luxuries. Once again, speaking to that very self-aware narration, I like when he even says that. He goes, hey, if you want an obvious metaphor, here you go. So very self-aware for sure. This doesn't happen until very late in the episode, but I want to bring it up now. It's just the idea that we're obviously seeing that there's all this costs that are continuously piling up. He has the unpaid cost to Barney. That's his priority and what he pays. Seems interesting that that is the case. And maybe we could talk about what that means when we get towards the end. But of course, also this punitiveness in him missing the coaching for the daughter and now saying we're going to get a coach. We're going to get a professional coach because you've been a little bit absentee. So it's like yet another way to use money to make him pay. I'm just getting caught up in the idea that we find out something about her. Maybe we save it for that next scene about her relationship with him and maybe his relationship with status and money maybe drove the wedge into the family, into the marriage in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
But they're piling up things, right? There's the repairs to the house, $9,000. It's funny how they put price tags on things here because when you're talking about $250,000 car, and then for me, $250,000 car seems worth it if you love the car. $250,000 watch for me, especially, is like, what is that? That seems preposterous. So when someone says, "Hey, we're going to have to, make a hole in your floor and kill these moths and replace the carpeting, and it's going to cost $9,000," I'm like, $9,000 to these people should be nothing. What are they worried about?
For a house that size, that doesn't seem unreasonable.
But she doesn't want to pay that either. But I mean, I guess everything adds up. But still, it seems like considering the potential damage, that doesn't seem like a big repair.
I agree.
But of course, having a weekly, how many thousands of dollars is it to have a professional coach their daughter every week?
I think it was $1,000 a week.
$1,000 a week. Wow. So that's going to be thousands of dollars until she's ready to go to Princeton. Two parts of that too. Once, of course, this additional stress, money he doesn't have that's being spent. But simultaneously, that this, of course, is also saying that you, as the dad, are no longer sufficient to be the coach. When he eventually gets back home, now this is the home he's sharing with his sister specifically, not the home that he's paying for that he does not live in anymore. Lou has turned up at his house. This was a very interesting scene.
It was.
This is a very intriguing to me in the show, by the way, the Lou character, because for some reason, when he first met her, I was thinking she's going to be a mentor of some kind. But now that I see her here, I do wonder if she sees there's a bigger prize here than what he sees himself. And she is going to put him over a barrel, so to speak. Do you have a feeling for which direction this relationship's going to go in?
I don't know which direction it's going to go in, but I feel like whatever direction it is, she's going to make sure that she has the upper hand. She has the
Right.
power. And that's what she showed us here, that I can find you. I know where your family lives.
Yep.
I'm willing to do business with you, but it's going to be on my terms. I thought all of it was very interesting, and she's definitely not someone that he should mess with. And I think that's what she's trying to convey to him, that even though he has this outsized ego, that maybe his confidence is misplaced.
I do think she wants to have the upper hand, obviously, and she is negotiating or manipulating, maybe both, but in the open, right? So she says things that make perfect sense. I had to make sure you weren't a cop. How do you know that
Yeah,
when you came back again? How do I know you weren't trying to set me up? Probably true. And
I
so she's
agree.
telling him something that's true. She's also saying straight up that I'm not just threatening you. I'm saying if you get caught and you get in trouble and we get into this together, remember that you do not talk about me because I know
Yeah,
everything about you.
yeah,
But she also tells him, you, Mr. Confidence Man, con man stands for confidence man.
yeah,
He is not a con man. He is an overly confident man, let's call
yes.
him. That she is warning him that just because you're good at what you used to do doesn't mean you know anything about this. And I found out everything about you just from looking at your license plate number. And you assumed going in there that the people you'd be dealing with, that you'd be smarter than all of them. But you might be smart in some ways in your arena, but you're not smart here. And I think that she's absolutely right.
Spot
And
on.
not only is she spot on about that, she also, basically reads him perfectly, saying, you're broke. You are stealing stuff from your friends' houses and pawning them and driving a $200,000 car
Mhm.
because appearances to you are more important than anything else, which I do think is one of those interesting things. In his narration, he goes, can you believe this, what these people fall for? And he is the biggest, example of somebody who is potentially putting themselves in incredible amounts of risk beyond financially in this particular case. Because he's just trying to keep up appearances, right? So it's this that's the balancing act that the show, for me, is pulling off.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, again, so much of this is in the casting, because with a less
Sure.
likable actor, it might not work at all.
I think Lou is also great casting because even if she became uh, antagonistic straight on at this point, I would kind of want her. I kind of want her to be a mentor to him, right? Like I kind of want that relationship to develop that way, and I think it's because of this kind of subtle knowingness but warmth from this character. But she still seems that like, hey, if the decision is between her and someone else, she's definitely going to do what she needs to do. And this culminates in this night of partying where we have Nick has invited all the men to his place. He's throwing a big bash. Apparently, this happens pretty regularly. The women, most of them, not all of them, some of them are at this party, but a large group of them are going to some self defense class at Sam's house, right? Is that Sam's house?
It wasn't clear to me whose house it was.
Actually, it's not Sam's house, right? Because she's arriving there because he thinks that she might
True.
be coming that night. And of course, he thought he had plans with his kids. His kids have their own plans. Son's going to drum at a party. The daughter has plans with the boyfriend. And Sam has her own plans, of course, going to this fighting, this self defense class with the other wives or ex wives, I guess, in some of the cases. So this leaves Andrew to his own devices. Oh, and his sister, by the way, is not going to watch Jean Claude Van Damme movies with him either. She is heading out to perform at a club as well, which, of course, is nothing but trouble. He needs to go out
Yep.
and get some more money. So a few things happen here. He goes to the Resnick house. He eventually sees the husband later on at Nick's party.
Mhm.
A few interesting things here. We were talking about how unlikely it is that he just walks into people's houses. And how do they not have security systems? We hear when the wife comes in that she sets the alarm when she walks in. He is getting into these houses. How? I guess he went through the window. That's, they're acknowledging the fact that there are.
I hadn't picked up on that. What a good point.
Yeah, when she walks in, like, listen, it has like the alarm. It says that the alarm is armed, and it makes the, it says like front door open, front door closed. Or
Yeah,
alarm.
when he went into the house, the thing that I was remembering was our conversation from last week about
Mhm.
like everybody has cameras everywhere. There's no way
Right.
this would ever happen realistically. So I just had that thought actually, but you're making a good point.
Exactly to that point that we don't see where people have cameras if they do, but now we have an acknowledgement that they probably all have these alarm systems. And don't get me wrong, you run out to drop the kids off, you left the doors unlocked, and I could kind of buy this, but they need to sell this to me a little bit more. Like when he walks into the house and it's like, hello, hello, you can imagine he's like, hey, I was just visiting. He's a neighbor. He's friends, right? He could just be showing up. It would be weird that he came in through a side door, but it still is plausible. If this keeps happening, it starts to become like, hold on a second. And haven't they noticed you skulking around trying to get indoors on multiple people's ring cameras? So I do think that it is showing that this is all becoming maybe non-tenable. So to the show's credit, that they're acknowledging this a little bit. And in a few ways, right? We see the cops have been called in because this guy did notice his watch disappeared. And of course, we have this someone showing up in the house and he has to sneak out the window. And it's just the overall recklessness of it. And I'll leave the final scene to the very end of this discussion. But I think that exemplifies just how careless and reckless he's becoming in
Yeah,
this
well, becoming, he's only been doing this for like 3 days.
for a week or two.
But,
Yeah.
but even with the original watch, I get it that these are not everyday watches and it might be a while before somebody notices. But if I'm remembering correctly, the way that watch drawer was set up, there was a watch in every slot kind of. So
Right.
it would be very obvious that one was missing. I mean, you might not remember which watch you put where and blah blah, but you would remember I filled this drawer, every slot had a watch in it. And when you finally got around to opening up that drawer, which apparently is only a couple of days later, you would notice that that was missing.
Given all the things that little things I bump up against on the show, and there's been relatively few of them. The one, obviously, the egregious one is that where is the security in this town? Although at least now the cops have shown up, so maybe now the people will be more on alert. So we'll see how that plays into the plot here. I do have a big question here about terrible decisions. He decides to take the bottle of wine, a $30,000 bottle of wine. So probably something he can pawn. He could resell that. No one's got papers on the wine bottle. So I think he makes a pretty stupid decision in what he does with that bottle over the course of this
Yeah.
episode. More importantly, he sneaks out the window, spanning the two gates, trying to get away with the
Yeah.
bottle in his hand. And he answers the phone. Well, this is not the
I
time.
know. I
At
know.
least clear the gate before you answer the phone. What are you talking about?
But then also it seemed like a false dangerousness. It didn't look all that
Yes.
risky,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. He's not. Yeah. He's not going to die.
Yeah.
It's just silly that he just
Awkward.
wouldn't.
Awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and also the fact that it's like he can hop off the fence and then answer the phone. It's only delaying things by 35 seconds.
Yeah. That's true.
Or call him back. Call Barney back. Meanwhile, much more entertainingly, the and a really great scene was everything that happened at the ladies' party.
Okay, wait. Go back though. I just want to note because we didn't
Oh,
spell
of
it out.
course, yes,
When he was stealing the wine, he finds that the woman who lives there, who's a high-powered attorney, is sleeping
yes,
with her daughter's boyfriend.
right,
Ye-
yes.
Yikes.
Yeah, this was very funny. And this is the first of what's really been pitched in this show supposed unraveling of all these people's.
Dark
Actually,
secret.
I guess the SAT, the purchasing the SAT tests last week.
Yeah, and I was thinking about it after our conversation on the SATs. We were talking about, oh, maybe he'll turn to blackmail, and then we brought up the SATs. We didn't bring up, the rest of that scene was that he took pictures of it. So maybe in his head, he's already collecting his blackmail information.
Exactly. And now he has this new piece of information as well. So I do think that blackmail is definitely going to tie into this because what else would, yeah, the value there is going to be in those revelations for sure. And this is a big one. Yeah. And I totally missed, you buried the lead there where, yes, she comes in and almost catches him. She's having sex with this teenager.
Yeah, they say that their daughters are in school together. So,
Right. Right. So scandalous to say the least. So he now has another piece of information, which is way more valuable than a $30,000 bottle of wine. What would you pay to keep all of this quiet?
I don't know. The idea of being blackmailed is so stressful to me. I don't know if I could survive it.
I know. very stressful. And then, because I mean, then it's also the fact that you don't know if it's over after you pay
Yeah, I
whatever
think I would just have to come clean because I would be like, I can't live like this.
forever hanging over your head.
Right.
I did kind of gloss over that inadvertently. I wasn't intending to talk about it, but over at the self-defense party, it turns into a party. We see a lot of things happening here. Mel releasing this rage that we've seen inside of her since last week.
Vibrating with anger again.
Really great the way you see her like turn that switch on, and the actress herself, furious, and everybody's like kind of like, wow, cool. But then, of course, the way that this plays out, where she and Sam have this very sweet kind of relationship. My wife was cackling with laughter here. The whole idea that she's like flexing her arm and she goes, I could kick your butt. And she's like, let me see that arm, and starts twisting it. And it turns into this
Yes.
like really sad slap fight.
Yes. That is exactly how I would fight if I had to be in a fight. I related to it completely.
It was just hysterical. It's like it actually was turning, like potentially crossed over into something more serious, but they don't know how to fight, so they couldn't even turn it
Exactly.
into something more
They were
serious.
just smushing each other's faces.
Yes. It was pretty funny. But of course, the trigger for all of this is this underlying realization where Sam is talking about, being betrayed by her husband, Paul. And then she inadvertently says, well, it's different for you. You are the Paul. And then Mel suddenly makes that realization, like she didn't notice it before. She's like, oh my God, like suddenly she had to see herself in a different light. So I thought that was really interesting. And then, kind of what we suspected, given the earlier episodes, she confesses that, well, her husband had left the marriage to a large extent. And this was very melancholy, this idea that she also, it's kind of, we talked about how they maybe are pining for the same thing. She also seems to be pining for the relationship they had when they were younger, and they had really just drifted apart. He was primarily focused on his work and his status and climbing that corporate ladder and earning that money and having these things. And she just felt like she was one of the things in his life, but not the primary thing in his life. I really love this scene because not only seeing the insight that we get in her character, but seeing Sam take this all in and the multiple ways that she has to process this information. Maybe Coop, if she has some kind of long-term plan for him, maybe Coop is not going, it's not going to work out. But then also seeing the person who's the cheater in a more empathetic light. So I thought all of this was really clever.
I thought it was really well done. I think, we struggle here. I struggle a bit with the whole idea of an unreliable narrator. We don't know
Right.
what the truth is of what happened between them. I think if we go based on his flashback from last week of what his life has been, all of this work was in service of his family.
Right.
To give them these things. And how do you, we talked about this last week. How do you think you have all these nice things that you love?
Right.
It's because I'm always working.
Right.
We didn't see, and again, could be unreliable narrator. We didn't see him straying, right? We didn't see him at a strip club, right? Not that, I mean, I'm sure he was at some point. Finance guys do that, but you know what I'm saying? His view of it is he was always striving, and partly because that's what his family needed or wanted.
Right.
Her view of it is you had no focus on us because you were so busy striving. And she has in her head, I think, justified that she cheated on him. And that's why she was so shocked at this comparison that I'm the Paul.
Right. Right.
Because in her head, Paul's the bad guy. But in her head, she's not the bad guy.
Exactly.
Her husband is.
Right. I mean, that's what's interesting about the whole, that shifting that perspective tells the story in a very different light, right?
Right. And the reality is probably somewhere in between, right?
Exactly. Although Paul, when we get to see him, seems to be a real piece of garbage.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's really comparable. Yeah.
Right. She even says, Sam, that, she was at one point this thing that he adored. And of course, there'd been other women before him, before her and everything else. She kind of knew what she was getting into, but of course it hurts more when it happens to you, of course, always. When you see him, he has like this attitude of how dare she want these things or expect these things, and how it's going to break him financially, or at least what he's used to. And of course, Coop is there listening to all of this. And that gets really interesting as well, that dynamic, because now, of course, Paul seems to insinuate that he knows that he's sleeping with Sam. So I assume in this type of place, if he's saying that, everybody kind of knows, right?
Did you think he knew? I didn't get that.
Well, I mean, maybe he accuses him of it, but maybe he's just saying it like, "Oh, you want to sleep with her," or something like that. Maybe he didn't really mean it. It's hard to tell because that's pretty much where
The
the
fight starts.
the fight starts exactly. The wine gets smashed, the $30,000 bottle of wine. Once again, terrible that he didn't keep that home and just grab a $500 bottle of wine on the way over there. I was going to say like a $20 bottle of wine, which is what I would do, but these people don't have $20 bottles of wine. They
Right.
have $500 bottles. That's like just the rot gut they drink with dinner. Do you think, by the way, given the proportions of this Paul character, the body we see at the bottom of those stairs, head blown up in the very first episode, the very first scene, is a heavy set dude? Do you think Paul ends up dead? Do you think that's where we're headed?
Interesting. I mean, they're definitely creating a situation where we wouldn't mind if it was him.
Yes, that's a good point, right? Like if you're going to set up a scapegoat to be the murdered
Yeah.
person, yeah, this would be a good one.
So maybe.
It would also be good leverage. For example, let's say Lou blackmails him if he needs her help. That it would be good blackmail because you can imagine he fell down the stairs, he committed suicide and fell down the stairs, or something inadvertent happened. It was like an accidental death of some kind, and she'll be like, "You broke into his house. You know your fingerprints are everywhere. You were sleeping with his wife. This guy's got a bullet in his head. I don't think anyone's going to buy your story, buddy." So this could be additional leverage she has over Andrew as well, Coop. I love that narration where Coop is talking about the realization that these men fixated on all these different their cars, their scotches, all their things, their wines, of course. All these people who have achieved so much, but now are realizing that they're later in life, they've kind of passed their peaks, trying to spend money to make themselves feel relevant. There's whole economies, which is true, right? Of these luxury items
Oh,
that are
absolutely.
spawned out purely based on these people who are all just trying to one up each other.
No, this is when I had the thought about it so perfectly, skewering that kind of Westchester, Connecticut finance culture. So I think it was spot on.
Coop getting very cavalier about what he's doing, very overly confident after just doing this barely a week and feeling like he's got this all figured out already. Once again, Lou has him absolutely pegged. That he brings the $30,000 bottle of wine and opens it and serves it in front of the very person he stole it from. Maybe everyone's going to assume, well, everyone's got a $30,000 bottle of wine. But you know what? Like usually in a friend group, there's the one guy who loves wine and, the one guy who loves scotch and, tells everybody else about it all the time. It's not usually like everybody has a 30,000. Like you might be like, holy cow, I have that same bottle. I love that bottle. And then go home and notice it's missing. Like that's a pretty cocky thing for him to be doing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that, but you would think that he would say, what a coincidence.
Right. This is a rare bottle of wine. Even very wealthy people don't just drink $30,000 bottles of wine on a regular occasion. A $1,000 a glass wine when you go to a restaurant. It's got to be noticed, I think. And after that fight kicks off, Nick tries to divert that macho energy into some one-on-one basketball. Anybody can score on him. He's going to give them $1,000. Once again, this seems pretty small. Make it 10,000, my friend. And these guys, you got a $30,000 bottle of wine as a party favor. I think you could go more than $1,000.
Maybe he really did think someone was going to score on him, so he couldn't go 10,000 each because then it's going to add up too fast.
And this one guy does score, right? He's actually a former college basketball player, but he breaks his ankle in the process.
Okay, so first of all, did this give you flashbacks to Fire Island? Is my first question.
When I smashed my leg, it seemed pretty unrealistic that it would break that way. This guy might have some bone density issues. The bone popping out of the skin and everything. I'm like, man, this is a pretty serious break. Maybe he just hasn't played basketball in a really long time. It seems like he just twisted his ankle really badly, and
You understand that he got taken down. It wasn't just an accident.
he pushed him. But I mean, that still is pretty severe break. Yeah, and but I mean, it's a good point you make, right? Like this guy's a professional basketball player who's probably just a few years out of playing in the NBA. So these guys are significantly weaker and untrained consider compared to
I
him.
don't think he was trying to cause what happened, but I
Oh,
do think he
absolutely
was
not.
trying to hurt him.
He also didn't want him to score on him, right? So he went a little too
Yeah.
hard for sure. What do you think about him giving Barney this bag of cash? Don't you think Barney's going to ask him questions? Oh, by the way, he has this whole other story going on that he's negotiating with some company from Dubai that is, they're just negotiating the deal. I do like the fact that everybody's like, oh, I'll move my money to where you are. And he's like, hold on a second. I can't
Well,
actually touch anybody's money right now. Although he should turn it down, by the way. He could start a Ponzi scheme. That's what he should do.
he could start a Ponzi scheme. That would make much more sense for him.
Exactly.
But I did like that they addressed that he has to explain something about where he
Right.
works instead
Yeah.
of trying to keep that lie going. So
He even, I mean, I guess the wife just hears it through the grapevine eventually. Now she knows that he's not working there anymore, which would be an opportunity once again for him to negotiate the fact that maybe we need to cut back on some of these amenities temporarily. And he does not. He's like, I can do it. Okay. You decide you want to get a professional. All right, we'll do it. Like he just says yes to everything. And I mean, I guess this is eventually going to come to an end or go, in some much more darker direction potentially. And he hands Barney a bag, a brown paper bag full of cash, which, of course, is the $40,000 that he owes him from, I guess, past fees. But it is interesting that you would think that Barney would hang in there until he found work again, for example, since he knows everything that's going on with his finances. What do you make of him giving the money to him first? Do you think he just felt sympathy for him as a friend and seeing that he is, a little financially strapped given what's happening at the house?
I feel like this is keeping his reputation going in this circle. That
True.
regardless of what
Yeah.
he's doing outside of this circle and what people think about him, Barney can say, well, one way or the other, I'm getting paid, so things can't be that bad for him.
But don't you think if he thinks Barney's going to say something, handing him a bag full of cash is
Yeah,
pretty
no, that's
sketchy?
true.
He's going to start asking even more questions. But
Totally
yeah,
right.
I see your
Yeah.
point that, you want to be like, well, he's paying his bills, right? So, all right. Hunter goes to drum at this party. No one knows who he is. The girls are like, oh, what school do you go to? And he's like, I go to your school.
Your school.
But they pressure him into taking some mushrooms. Don't take mushrooms before drumming, everybody. Ends up being a very bad decision. Or does it? Because in the end, it turns out that, hey, the next day at school, everyone knows who he is. And it doesn't seem like he's a pariah or anything. So maybe this all worked out for the best.
Well, it's exactly what his aunt tells him.
Right.
Everybody here is so messed up. No one's going to remember any of it. So don't worry.
They remembered him, though, which is a good thing.
That's true.
But that speaks to Allie. What do you think? A couple of things here. First of all these people, she supposedly is a crazy person. You ask questions about like what is her mental illness, considering how stable she seems. Not only does she
Yeah.
seem stable, who is the actual parent here? Not only to Hunter when he needs him, when he needs
Yeah.
her, I should say, and she's there right away. But she's parenting her brother too. Her brother is spinning out.
Mhm.
Maybe he has mental issues. Maybe he has manic or something because his decision making is very questionable. And she's the one who's grounding everybody here. So what a weird turn of events, considering
The irony of it all.
yeah, we expect her to be completely a loose cannon, and she's the one who's grounding everybody right now.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think I don't know this actress very well at all. I can't remember seeing her in anything, but I think she's really beautiful in this role. I love her dynamic with all the characters.
Yeah, I feel like there's like a Maggie Gyllenhaal
A
vibe,
little
kind
bit,
of.
absolutely,
Yeah,
yes, absolutely.
I
What do you
like
think
her.
about this dude who tries to hit on her, and she's just like, "You don't want any part of this. This guy's going to come back, right? He's got to come back at some point, right?"
Do you think so? I wouldn't mind it.
I assume that it's almost like if it had been a long scene and then she like tells her whole biography and then at the end he's like, all right, lady, I'm out of here. It would be like a one and done. But the fact that he's barely there, I have a feeling like he's going to show up at her show again. He's going to be like, I know, can we just have a drink? And then little by little, they get to know each other. It just seems like why even have that scene if it's not going to lead to anything else? I wouldn't mind it either. I think it would be
Yeah,
nice, actually. Good for her.
agree.
Until she has her next mental breakdown.
That's right.
Oh, I also thought that the fact that she is parenting both Andrew and Hunter, and we see Andrew being a drummer, Hunter being a drummer, I think over and over again, on the surface, they probably don't seem to be very similar. And it's interesting that he's having troubles connecting to his son. I do start to wonder that, other than like the artifice of this life that he's built, maybe he is more similar to his son than we expect.
Maybe.
You know, towards the end of the night, one more important thing happens there. This is when Barney actually pukes into the toilet. What do you make of the fact when Coop says to Barney, "Have you ever looked at something?" What's the actual phrase he says? "Have you ever looked at something so long that you stop seeing it at all?" And then
Mhm.
Barney asks him, "What are you talking about?" And I thought he was going to say his wife or something like that. He says his life, as in he has not been appreciating anything in his life. Barney seems to be taking that in very deeply, but it's not. It's just him getting nauseous. But for a moment there, it's like, oh my God, is Barney going to have some realization of his own? But no, he just has to go puke in the unconnected toilet bowl. That's the heavy-handed metaphor. He says, if you want to have a heavy-handed metaphor, here's a guy puking into a $30,000 toilet bowl that's not attached to anything. Do you think he's talking about the relationship with his wife? She mentions specifically that that's what the alienation was between them. Felt like he was taking her for granted. He's saying it goes beyond that, right? It's like all these things he's been taking for granted.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the whole idea of someone saying, "Stop and smell the roses," right?
Right,
Like you
right,
get so driven and so distracted by all of the things you need to check off your list, big and small, like got to drop off the kid at school, then got to go to work and get on this call. And yeah, they don't have to be these huge important things even, but all of a sudden your day has passed and it's time for bed and you feel like you've done nothing meaningful the entire day, right?
right.
And then all of a sudden days become weeks, become months, become years. I mean, I think that is a very familiar feeling, and it's easy to not acknowledge it because the time is passing so quickly. When do you even have time to slow down to think about that?
Especially when there is this constant acceleration, right? Of like the kids are getting older, they have
Yeah.
more requirements. You're doing well at work, so there's more money, there's more responsibilities, there's more meetings, there's more dinners with clients, there's more, and it's more what? Like, you're
Right. The
supposedly
momentum is building, but
right.
for what?
Exactly. And I think that's basically what the whole show is trying to discover. And then we get to that final moment, if you, or towards the very end, we see Hunter going back to school. We have this escalation of consequences. The cops are now in pursuit. What did you think about the cops? I thought this was a very funny scene, by the way, where he's like, someone stole my watch. And the female detective is like, you
Yeah.
just misplaced it. And like, no, I know my watches. This was stolen, which when he says that, of course, I know my $250,000 watches. It's missing. And she goes, that's right. A crook came in here and stole one watch, but left all the other ones and left all the money and left everything else just
Yeah.
as it was, which makes it
Right.
sound completely ridiculous. It seems way more likely that someone misplaced that, especially someone very wealthy. So you understand her perspective. And maybe that's the genius of how he is stealing here, because all of these things seem to be like, oh, like someone stole one bottle of wine, but not all the wine, or not the most expensive bottle of wine. Someone stole one of your watches, but not all of your watches. So all of this seems very sketchy. Someone took one roll of cash, but they left all the other ones. Like, it's all of
Maybe
this
that's the
seems
brilliance of the plan.
exactly. This might be the way he's going to do this, accidentally falling ass backwards into a good plan. But of course, Sona, that's not the cliffhanger here. The cliffhanger is that, speaking of him really getting way over his skis here, he goes back to Nick's house. We already see that Nick is very touchy about his championship rings. Doesn't even want someone to wear them. You can look at it, but you can't wear it. He's going to steal this out of this display case, which is like in the entryway to this mansion as soon as you walk inside. That's what he goes for, like one of the most obvious things that Nick would definitely notice. And of course, someone has noticed because we hear a gun cock and then we cut the black. So, A, what does this say about him that he is willing to take these type of risks so early in this career trajectory as a criminal? If he's going to be successful at this, you might want to steal something and then see if anybody notices and then go back instead of just going
But he needs
willy.
the money. He's got bills.
Yeah, but you go for the ring. I mean, the ring is going to be obvious when it's lost. Second of all, where are you going to pawn this?
I
This
know.
ring goes to a specific person.
I
There's going to be
know.
like three people who could possibly have stolen that ring when you get down to it, right? Like, and he's on the list. Like, that's ridiculous.
True.
And of course, more importantly, who do you think is cocking that gun?
Well, I don't know. Maybe he's gotten overconfident, but I can't argue with anything you're saying. It does seem when you've got a whole house full of memorabilia that you could steal, why would you go for that? As far as who's there, I kind of feel like maybe it's the housekeeper.
I've heard that other multiple people have said that it's the housekeeper and
They made a
having
point of that showing that interaction between them and
yes,
when he returns to the house. Oh, I wasn't expecting you.
if it was the housekeeper, then how do you think this is going to play out?
And maybe he'll have a
Yeah,
co-conspirator.
she'll have to bring him in on it, right? She can't just be like, "It's okay, don't worry about it,"
Yeah.
right? There's got to
Yeah,
be
maybe.
she's going to have to work with him, and maybe that's how this goes. I actually thought it couldn't be the
Yeah, who do
housekeeper.
you think?
Yeah, see, I originally thought it couldn't be the housekeeper because I don't understand how that fits into the plot. And what I was thinking was Lou has had someone tailing him, right?
Hmm.
And that maybe someone who is Lou's accomplice has followed him in, however he got in, and bypassed the security. They followed him through the same window or the same whatever. And they are now cocking a gun, being like, idiot, if I could catch you, you're definitely going to get caught. And then this is a way where Lou kind of makes him wake up a little bit as to what's going on. But now I'm suddenly thinking you might be right. The house cleaner can get into anybody's house, right? Who
Well,
has
I mean, I also thought she might be a live-in.
true, but she may know she might have connections in the other houses. Yes, I do think that she's a live-in. Then I do still think that she might have connections in the neighborhood or maybe even work in other people's homes as well, like just for extra.
I know for us in our neighborhood, all the nannies are friends. So
Right.
maybe in their neighborhood, there's also a housekeeper network.
Right. And then if that's the case, then that would be a way where she's like, you're being way idiotic about this. Here's what something that, is that from her house cleaning, here's something he would never notice that's gone. And then through this whisper network, like you
Mhm.
mentioned, that, here's how you get in. Here's the passcode to get in because, we need to get into the houses. And then don't steal the obvious stuff, steal the obscure stuff. And it might not be worth as much, but no one's going to notice it's missing. You could take five things and make the same amount of money without being so ostentatious about it. I think that's interesting that it would work like in this kind of upstairs downstairs, like the old British type
Right.
shows where the staff knows everybody's secrets. So maybe that is what's the direction we're going in here. So what'd you think of this episode? How do you think it ranks compared to the first two? Did you still on board with the show? Excited about the
I
cliffhanger?
enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I'm excited about the show. I feel like it was a bit of a setup episode
Mm-hmm.
to get things moving forward from here on. So I felt like it was a little bit slower paced and a little bit just more laying the groundwork than the prior two episodes were. But that being said, I still enjoyed it and I'm still looking forward to watching more.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this show, probably more than I expected up until this point, and I like this a lot as well. I like the hangout elements of it. I like seeing him hang out with his sister and seeing these different aspects where it's not maybe people are disappointed because they're thinking, "Oh, I thought he was going to be pulling off a heist every single week," which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of how they advertised it. But I actually like the character stuff. And honestly, if he was going to become like some grand thief minute one, that would be really unconvincing as well. So seeing him become better at this and the story evolving more naturally, for me, I like that better. Yeah, if it never evolves beyond that, if he never really starts pulling off these robberies or blackmails or whatever, assuming these escalating crimes, if that doesn't happen at all, or if it only starts happening towards the very, very end of the season, I'd be disappointed. But this early on, I like the fact that I just like hanging out with these characters. Like I said before, I loved seeing the women fighting with each other. That was like so hilarious and it's so interesting to see them make these revelations about themselves. Those type of things work for me really well.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about it, I think, even if the plot is not bulletproof.
Yes, yeah. I still have a huge. I mean, I guess you just have to accept the fact
Yes,
that
just suspend disbelief.
yes, people just whatever. They're running out the door to take their kids to tennis practice, and the alarm does not set itself, and they just keep forgetting to turn it on, which happens. But it still seems very convenient that no one has seen him wandering through their backyards.
Yes, agree.
I have to tell you, all we would need to do would see see him in his friend's house during the party, seeing the camera. The first house, by the way, he steals from, he's inside the house, he's there for the party. And if he just saw like the place where he can see the Ring cameras on display on like a computer screen in their office or something as a screensaver, the side approach is blind, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
anything like that, right? Just it doesn't take a lot to plug this hole, to be honest with you. So anyway, we just trust the fact that he could just come and go as he pleases. All right, Sona, enjoy the weekend.
It's going to be a beautiful day tomorrow. Very spring/summer like. So I'm looking forward to getting out there and enjoying it.
Yeah, enjoy the weather. Don't work over the
Safe
weekend.
travels to you. I hope you have a
Yes,
great vacation.
and
Can't
I
wait to hear
will.
all about it.
Yeah, tell you all about it when we meet again in about a little over a week.
Sounds good.
All right, and make sure to watch the next episode.
I wouldn't miss it.
All right, thanks again for the conversation.
Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.